I don't know exactly when it stopped being a joke. If you asked me now, I'd probably say it was somewhere between the third message and the moment I realized he'd stopped sleeping. But at the time, it felt harmless. Clever, even. Like I was in control of something for once. For context, my name's William. I'm not proud of what I'm about to write, but I've carried it around long enough that it's starting to rot inside me. So here it is. A few years ago, I worked in a small logistics office. Nothing glamorous, spreadsheets, late shipments, passive-aggressive emails. The kind of place where resentment builds quietly, like mold behind a wall. And then there was Daniel. He wasn't my boss, technically, but he might as well have been. The kind of guy who smiles while undermining you. Corrects you in meetings. Forwards your mistakes to management. Just to keep everyone aligned. You know the type. At first, I brushed it off. Told myself it wasn't personal. But it was. It built up slowly, every comment, every sideways glance, every time he'd say, "Just trying to help, William," in that tone that made it clear he wasn't. I didn't want to confront him. I'm not that guy. I avoid conflict. Always have. So instead, I started thinking about other ways to even the score. That's where the idea came from. Anonymous messages. At first, it was just a passing thought. Something stupid, like what if I messed with him a little? Make him feel watched. Unsettled. Just enough to knock him off balance the way he did to me. I told myself it wouldn't be serious. No threats. Nothing illegal. Just psychological pressure. Fear as a tool. Looking back now, that's the exact moment I should have stopped. But I didn't. Once the idea settled in, it didn't leave. It just evolved. At first, I told myself I was only curious. I started paying more attention to Daniel, not in a creepy way, at least that's what I believed, but enough to notice patterns. When he arrived. When he left. Who he talked to. What he posted publicly online. That last part made things easy. People share everything. Gym check-ins, late-night complaints, photos outside their apartment buildings. Daniel was no different. Within a week, I knew his routine better than my own. I didn't think of it as stalking. I framed it as research. That's how I justified everything in those early days. I set up a burner email. Then another. I didn't want anything traced back to me, even though I still insisted to myself this wasn't anything serious. Just a prank stretched a little further than usual. The first draft of the message sat in my notes app for hours. I kept rewriting it, trying to find the right balance, unsettling, but vague. Personal, but not obvious. Something that would make him pause. Something that would make him wonder who was watching. I stared at the screen for a long time before sending it. It's strange how something so small, just a few lines of text, can feel like stepping off a cliff. My hands were actually shaking, which felt ridiculous at the time. I kept thinking, it's just an email. People send worse things every day. But this felt different because it was targeted. Intentional. I finally hit send late at night, when I knew he'd probably check his phone before bed. The message was simple. You shouldn't stay so late at the office. Not everyone who notices you has good intentions. No threats. No names. Just enough to plant a seed. Right after I sent it, I felt this rush, adrenaline mixed with something darker. Not quite guilt yet. More like anticipation. The next morning, I got to the office earlier than usual. I didn't even turn on my computer right away. I just waited. And when Daniel walked in, something was different. He looked tired. Distracted. And for the first time since I'd known him, unsure. I wish I could say I stopped there. That the look on his face, tired, distracted, slightly paranoid, snapped me back to reality. But it didn't. If anything, it confirmed that the idea worked. That's what hooked me. Daniel wasn't his usual self that morning. He checked his phone more than usual, glanced over his shoulder when someone walked behind him, Even left the office earlier than I'd ever seen him leave. It was subtle, but I noticed everything. Because I was looking for it. And here's the part one hate admitting, I felt satisfied. Not happy exactly. Not proud. But like some invisible scale had shifted just a little in my favor. For once, he wasn't the one in control of the room. I told myself I'd leave it at one message. Just enough to shake him, to even things out. But that thought didn't last long. By the end of the day, I was already drafting the second message. Because one message creates doubt. But repetition? Repetition creates fear. The second message is where the line really started to blur. I didn't send it right away. I waited 2 days. Long enough for him to start convincing himself the first message was a one-off, some random spam, maybe a prank from a friend. I wanted that sense of relief to settle in before I pulled it away again. That was the strategy, at least. This time, I made it more personal. Not overtly threatening, but specific enough to feel real. Routine makes people predictable. Gym on Tuesdays, same time, same place. You should be more careful. I remember hesitating again before sending it. Not because I thought it was wrong, but because I was trying to get it just right. That's the part that bothers me now, how methodical I became. I hit send. The effect was immediate. The next day, he didn't go to the gym. I know because I checked his usual social posts. Nothing. At work, he was quieter, more withdrawn. He even asked around if anyone had received weird emails. I kept my head down. Played along. And inside, that same feeling came back, stronger this time. Control. By the third message, it wasn't a decision anymore. It was routine. That's how quickly things shift, I guess. What felt like a one-time thing turned into something I built my evenings around. I'd get home, sit with my laptop, and think about what detail to use next, what small piece of his life I could twist into something unsettling. I started noticing everything. The coffee shop he stopped at in the mornings. The exact time he'd step out for calls. Even the way he always parked in the same spot, slightly crooked, like he was always in a hurry. The third message mentioned the car. You should lock it more carefully. Not everyone just walks past. I didn't touch his car. I never planned to. But that didn't matter. What mattered was the image it created in his head. At work, the change was obvious now. He double-checked doors. Asked security about cameras. Started leaving in groups instead of alone. And people noticed. They joked about it. But I didn't laugh. Because I knew exactly why it was happening. Up until that point, everything felt controlled. Measured. Like I was running an experiment and getting exactly the results I expected. Then Daniel went to HR. I didn't hear it directly from him. That would have been too obvious. Instead, it came up in one of those awkward office-wide reminders, something about reporting suspicious communications, staying vigilant, not engaging with unknown senders. Generic on the surface. But I knew. And suddenly, what I'd been doing didn't feel like a clever game anymore. It felt exposed. I started overthinking everything. Did I use the same phrasing twice? Could the emails somehow be traced? Had I overlooked something obvious? For the first time, fear crept in, not for him, but for me. I almost stopped right there. Almost. But then I saw him later that day, talking to HR near the glass meeting room. His posture was tense, his voice lower than usual. He kept glancing around like someone might be watching. And instead of backing off, I felt the urge to push further. Because now it wasn't just about control. It was about not losing it. After HR got involved, I should have stopped. That would have been the smart move. Quietly disappear, let the whole thing fade into office gossip. Instead, I convinced myself I needed one more message. Not to scare him more, that's what I told myself, but to close it properly. Like there was some kind of clean ending to what I'd started. This one was different. I referenced something from inside the office. Not public. Not something he posted. Something only a coworker would know. You shouldn't trust everyone in that office. Some people know more about you than you think. The second I sent it, I felt it. Not adrenaline this time. A drop in my stomach. Because I'd just changed the rules. The next day, the atmosphere at work was off. Conversations stopped when people walked by. Daniel wasn't just anxious anymore, he was suspicious. Of everyone. Including me. And for the first time, I realized something I hadn't before. I wasn't just messing with him anymore. I was tearing something bigger apart. What I didn't expect was how quickly it stopped being just his problem. Before, it was contained. One person acting strange, brushing it off, maybe getting a few sympathetic looks. But after that last message, something shifted in the office. People started talking. Quietly at first. Then more openly. Questions like, "Did you hear what's going on with Daniel?" turned into, "What if it's someone here?" That's when things got messy. Daniel began treating everyone differently. Shorter replies. Suspicious looks. He even snapped at one of the interns for borrowing his charger, something he never would have done before. And HR didn't drop it either. They started asking around more directly. Casual one-on-one conversations that didn't feel casual at all. I got called in on the third day. Sitting across from someone asking if I'd noticed unusual behavior was surreal. I kept my answers neutral, calm. Played the concerned coworker. But inside? My mind was racing. Because the thing about paranoia is, once it spreads, you can't control where it goes next. If it had stayed at emails, maybe I could have kept pretending it was manageable. But then something happened I didn't plan. Daniel changed his routine completely. No more predictable schedule. No more solo walks to the parking lot. He started working from home some days, leaving early on others, arriving at different times. It threw everything off. And with that, I lost the one thing I'd relied on from the beginning, certainty. I didn't know what to reference anymore. So I made a mistake. I guessed. I sent a message implying he'd been followed after work the previous night. It was vague, but still specific enough to land, or at least I thought it would. It didn't. The next day, he looked different. Not scared. Focused. Later, I overheard him talking to someone in a low voice, saying, "That's not possible. I wasn't even out." That's when it hit me. I'd broken the illusion. And once someone realizes the fear isn't real, they stop reacting to it. Or worse, they start looking for the source. After that slip, everything changed, not loudly, but in a way that felt deliberate. Daniel stopped reacting the way I expected. No more obvious anxiety, no more restless checking over his shoulder. On the surface, it almost looked like he'd calmed down. But it wasn't calm. It was control. He started asking more questions at work, subtle ones. Who stayed late? Who lived nearby? Who had access to certain internal details? It was all framed casually, but I could see the pattern. He was narrowing things down. And for the first time, I felt what I'd been building for him all along. That constant awareness. That quiet tension. I tried to act normal, but it's harder than you think when you're suddenly aware of every word you say. Every glance. Every reaction. Then one afternoon, he stopped by my desk. Just a quick conversation about work. Nothing unusual. Except he lingered a second too long before leaving. And as he walked away, I had this sinking feeling. Not that he knew, but that he was getting closer. That feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got worse over the next few days. Every normal interaction started to feel loaded. Every email, every meeting, every casual, "Hey," in the hallway, I kept wondering if there was something underneath it. So I did the only thing I could think of. I stopped. No more messages. No more checking his routines. I shut down the burner accounts, deleted what I could, tried to erase any trace that connected me to all of it. I told myself that silence would fix things. That without new messages, the situation would slowly lose momentum and people would move on. But silence doesn't erase suspicion. It amplifies it. Daniel didn't relax. If anything, he became more focused. HR was still involved, still asking questions, still watching. And me? I started overcorrecting. Being overly friendly. Too careful. Thinking before every sentence. That's the problem when you try to suddenly act normal. People notice. And the more I tried to disappear, the more visible I felt. For a while, nothing happened. No confrontation, no accusations. Just that constant pressure sitting in the background, like something waiting to surface. And then I made another mistake. A small one. The kind you don't notice until it's too late. I was helping Daniel with something. Ironically, he'd asked me directly. A report he was struggling with. We were sitting side by side, going over numbers, and he mentioned the messages again. Half joking, half serious. Said something like, "Whoever it is, they pay attention to details." And without thinking, I replied, "Yeah, especially patterns." The second the words left my mouth, I felt it. That pause. He didn't react immediately, but I saw it, that slight shift in his expression. Like a piece clicking into place. It wasn't proof. Not even close. But it was enough to make him look at me differently. Really look. After that, he didn't say anything. Just nodded, finished the conversation, and went back to his desk. But from that moment on, I knew I'd given him something. It didn't happen dramatically. No shouting, no scene. Just a quiet request from HR to have a quick chat. I knew before I even stood up. The room felt smaller than I remembered. Neutral walls, polite expressions, the kind that tried to make everything seem routine. Daniel was there too, sitting slightly off to the side. That's when it became real. They didn't accuse me outright. Not at first. They laid things out slowly, patterns in the messages, timing, access to certain internal details. Then Daniel spoke. Calm. Controlled. He mentioned my comment. The way I'd phrased things. Said it matched the tone of the messages. Still not proof. But enough. Then they showed me something I hadn't expected, IT logs. Not the content of the emails, but timestamps. Access points. Overlaps with my activity. That's when the control I thought I had completely disappeared. I tried to explain it away. Downplay it. Call it a misunderstanding. But the more I talked, the worse it sounded. And deep down I knew it was over. They didn't call the police. That's the part people usually ask about first, so I'll say it up front. What I did crossed lines, definitely, but it stayed just on the edge of something they could handle internally. I was terminated the same week. No dramatic escort out, no public announcement, just a quiet meeting, a signed document, and a reminder not to contact anyone from the company again. Daniel never spoke to me after that day. In some ways, that was worse. The silence gave me too much space to think. At first, I tried to minimize it in my head. Told myself it wasn't that serious. That no one got hurt physically. That it was just messages. But that's not true. I watched someone unravel, and I kept going. That's the part that sticks. Now, looking back, I don't see it as control or cleverness. It was insecurity, turned outward in the worst way. If you ever find yourself wanting to teach someone a lesson like this, don't. You don't control where it stops. And when it turns back on you, you won't recognize yourself anymore.